The sun beat down on Red Hollow like it had a personal grudge. Dust hung in the air, thick and choking, turning everything the color of old bone, the kind of heat that made men mean and women desperate. Mara Vance stood on a wooden platform in the center of town, hands bound in front of her, sweat tracking lines through the dirt on her face. Her dress, once pale blue, now stained and torn, clung to her swollen belly. 6 months along, maybe 7. Hard to say when you'd been locked in a shed for 3 weeks with nothing but scraps and shame for company. The crowd pressed close. Too close. She could smell them, whiskey, tobacco, unwashed bodies baking in the afternoon sun. Could hear them too. The whispers weren't even whispers anymore. Whore. Disgrace. Got what she deserved. Her father stood to the side of the platform, shoulders squared, jaw tight. Thomas Vance, town butcher, church elder, a man who'd rather die than admit his bloodline carried anything imperfect. He wouldn't look at her. Hadn't looked at her since the day she told him. "We'll start the bidding at $50, the auctioneer announced. His name was Pruitt, fat neck, thin mustache, the kind of man who enjoyed this. $50. The price of a decent horse. Mara's knees wanted to buckle. She locked them. Wouldn't give them that. "50, someone called from the back. Laughter rippled through the crowd. 55. 60. They weren't even looking at her face. Their eyes crawled over her body like insects, lingering on her belly, her breasts, the curve of her hips. Calculating, assessing, deciding what she was worth. Her father's jaw worked. Still wouldn't look. "Do I hear 70? Silence. The sun pressed down. Sweat rolled into her eyes. She blinked it away, scanning the crowd for the one face she needed to see. Daniel Carr. He was there. Back row. Hat pulled low, arms crossed, looking anywhere but at her. 3 months ago, he'd whispered promises in the dark. Told her he loved her. Told her they'd run away together, start fresh somewhere clean and new. 2 months ago, she'd told him about the baby. He'd gone pale, then angry, then gone. When her father found out, he'd dragged her to Daniel's door, demanded he make it right. Daniel had looked her father dead in the eye and said, "That baby ain't mine." Simple as that. 4 words, and her life was over. 70, a voice called. Old man Patterson. Ran a boarding house on the edge of town. Mara had heard stories about what happened to girls who worked for him. 75, another man. She didn't recognize him, didn't want to. Pruitt grinned. 75, do I hear 80? A hand touched her elbow. She jerked away. "Easy now," Pruitt murmured, too quiet for the crowd. "Ain't gonna hurt you. Yet." Her stomach turned. She swallowed bile. 80, Patterson again. The crowd shifted. Someone pushed forward, a ranch hand she'd seen around town. Young, mean eyes. 85, 90, 100. The numbers climbed. Mara's vision blurred. This wasn't happening, couldn't be happening. This was Red Hollow, 1881. Women had rights now, didn't they? But rights didn't mean much when your own father signed the papers. When the judge, who owed Thomas Vance a favor, agreed this was for her protection and welfare. When the whole damn town decided your shame was their entertainment. 100 going once, 200. The voice cut through the noise like a knife through butter. Deep, rough. The kind of voice that didn't ask twice. The crowd went still. Mara's head snapped up. A man stood at the back of the gathered crowd. Tall. Taller than anyone else there, broad shoulders draped in a worn canvas coat despite the heat. Dark hat pulled low, shadowing most of his face. But she could see his jaw. Hard. Scarred. $200, he repeated. Not louder. Didn't need to be. Pruitt's grin faltered. Do I hear 210? Silence. Patterson shifted his weight, glanced at the stranger, looked away quick. The ranch hand who'd been bidding took a step back. 220? Pruitt tried. His voice had lost its edge. Nobody moved. The stranger walked forward. The crowd parted like water. Didn't even think about it, just moved, made space. As he got closer, Mara could see more. Tanned skin, dark hair streaked with gray at the temples, lines around his eyes and mouth that spoke of hard years and harder choices. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone. Old, faded. but deep. He stopped at the base of the platform, looked up at her. His eyes were gray, storm cloud gray. And they didn't crawl over her like the others had. They just looked, saw her. Not the belly, not the shame, her. 200, he said again. This time to her, not Pruitt. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. 200 going once. Pruitt had found his voice again, eager to close this deal before something went wrong. Twice. Thomas Vance finally looked at his daughter. His face was stone. No regret, no second thoughts. Just relief that it was almost over. Sold! The hammer came down. To Mr. Rourke for $200. Silas Rourke. Mara knew the name. Everyone in Red Hollow knew the name. Mountain man, trapper. The kind of man children whispered about when they wanted to scare each other. Lived alone up in the high country. Came down twice a year, spring and fall, to trade pelts and supplies. Didn't talk to anyone. Didn't stay long. Rumors followed him like shadows. Said he'd killed men in the war. Said he'd killed more after it. Said he'd lost his family to raiders and burned their homestead to the ground with the bodies still inside. Said he was dangerous. Pruitt produced papers. Rourke pulled a leather pouch from his coat and counted out bills. 20s. Crisp and clean. More cash than most of these people saw in a year. Thomas Vance took the money without a word, folded it, tucked it in his vest pocket, turned and walked away through the crowd. Didn't look back. Mara watched him go. Something in her chest cracked. Not broke. It had already been broken. This was different. This was the sound of the last piece falling away. She's all yours, Pruitt said to Rourke. Too cheerful, trying to reclaim some authority. Papers here say you're responsible for her welfare, housing, and conduct. Any trouble she causes, it's on you. Rourke took the papers, didn't look at them. Untie her. Pruitt blinked. What? Her hands. Untie them. Well now, that ain't... Rourke's hand moved to his belt. Not threatening, just resting near the knife sheathed there. His eyes never left Pruitt's face. Pruitt swallowed. Right, sure, of course. He climbed onto the platform, fumbled with the rope around Mara's wrists. His hands shook. The knot came loose, and the rope fell away. Mara rubbed her wrists. Red marks. Raw skin. She'd been wearing those ropes for an hour while they gathered the crowd. Rourke extended a hand toward her. Can you walk? His voice was different when he spoke to her, quieter. Not soft. Nothing about this man was soft, but careful. I can walk, she managed. Her voice came out hoarse. She hadn't spoken since they tied her up. She took his hand. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. He helped her down from the platform. The crowd watched. Nobody spoke. The entertainment was over, but they weren't ready to leave yet. Wanted to see what happened next. Rourke ignored them. He released her hand as soon as her feet hit solid ground. Didn't pull her close. Didn't assert ownership. Just stood there, a wall of muscle and silence between her and the rest of Red Hollow. You got anything you need to collect? He asked. Mara shook her head. Everything she owned had fit in one bag, and her father had burned it the day he locked her in the shed. Right. Rourke turned toward the edge of town where a horse waited, a big gray gelding, patient and well-fed. A pack mule stood beside it, loaded with supplies. He started walking. Mara followed. Didn't know what else to do. Behind them, the crowd began to murmur. Whispers built into conversation. Someone laughed. Life in Red Hollow moved on. It was already forgetting her. Daniel Carr stood in the same spot, hat still low, arms still crossed. As Mara passed, their eyes met for just a moment. She saw nothing there. No guilt, no regret, no recognition, just relief that his problem had been solved. She looked away first, kept walking. At the edge of town, Rourke stopped at his horse. He opened a saddlebag and pulled out a canteen, held it out to her. Drink. She took it, unscrewed the cap. The water was cool, clean. She drank deep, not realizing how thirsty she'd been until the liquid hit her throat. When she lowered the canteen, he was watching her again, that same careful look. You ever ridden a horse? He asked. Not often. He nodded, pulled a blanket from his pack and draped it over the mule's back, then lifted her, easily, like she weighed nothing, onto the animal. Hold here. He guided her hands to the rope halter. Just stay balanced. She's steady. Where are we going? Mara asked. First real question. First time her brain had caught up to what was happening. Rourke swung up onto his horse, gathered the reins, looked at her with those gray eyes. Away from here, he said, and they rode out of Red Hollow as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. They traveled in silence for the first hour. The town fell away behind them. First the buildings, then the outlying farms, then the roads themselves. The land turned rough, rocky. The path Rourke followed wasn't really a path at all, just a suggestion of direction through scrub brush and scattered pine. The mule plodded along, patient and sure-footed. Mara held on, focusing on balance, on breathing, on anything except the screaming questions in her head. Who was this man? What did he want? Why had he paid so much? What would he expect in return? Her hands tightened on the rope. The baby kicked, hard enough that she gasped. Rourke glanced back. You all right? Fine. The lie came automatic. He looked at her another moment, then turned forward again. The sun dropped lower. The air began to cool. They climbed higher, following a route only Rourke seemed to see. The mountains rose around them, not the gentle slopes visible from town, but the real mountains. The high country. Granite peaks clawing at the sky. Pine forests so thick they swallowed sound. Mara's thighs burned. Her back ached. The baby pressed against her ribs, making it hard to breathe. She didn't complain. Complaining was weakness, and she couldn't afford weakness. Not now. Not with this stranger who'd bought her like livestock and was taking her. Where? The light was dying when Rourke finally stopped. They'd reached a small clearing beside a creek. Water burbled over stones, clear and cold. He dismounted, then came to help her down. His hands were gentle but impersonal, professional, like handling cargo. We'll camp here tonight, he said. Can you gather kindling? Yes. He nodded, started unpacking the mule. Mara moved into the tree line, collecting fallen branches and dry pine needles. Her body screamed at every movement, but she ignored it, gathered enough wood for a decent fire, carried it back to the clearing in armfuls. Rourke had set up a small camp with practiced efficiency. Bedroll. Supplies. A fire pit ringed with stones. He took the wood from her without comment and built the fire. Good structure, proper airflow, had it burning in minutes. As darkness fell, he prepared food. Not much. Dried meat. Hard biscuits. But he soaked the biscuits in water from the creek first, softening them, made them easier to eat. He handed her a portion. It ain't fancy. It's fine. She sat on a flat rock near the fire, ate slowly. The food settled in her stomach like lead, but she forced it down. Needed the strength. Rourke ate standing up, scanning the tree line, looking for what she didn't know. When they finished, he poured water from his canteen into a tin cup and handed it to her. Drink all of it. She obeyed. He took the cup back, refilled it, drank himself. Then he moved to his bedroll and sat, began checking his weapons. A rifle, 2 pistols, a long hunting knife. He cleaned each one methodically, checked the loads, set them within easy reach. Mara watched. Her heart kicked against her ribs. He noticed, looked up. You're safe. Am I? The question came out before she could stop it. Raw, real. Rourke set down the pistol he'd been cleaning, met her eyes across the fire. I ain't gonna hurt you, he said. Voice flat, factual. Ain't gonna touch you unless you're in danger and I'm pulling you out of it. Ain't gonna demand anything you ain't willing to give. Then why? Her voice cracked. Why would you pay? $200. He picked up the pistol again, resumed cleaning. Because nobody else was gonna do right by you. You don't know me. Don't need to. I'm pregnant. The words stuck in her throat. I'm used goods. Everyone says so. His hand stopped moving. He looked at her again, and this time something flickered in those gray eyes. Not pity, something harder, angrier. Everyone's a damn fool, he said, and you ain't goods. You're a person. The simplicity of it hit her like a fist. She looked away, blinking hard. There's a second bedroll, Rourke continued, nodding toward his pack. Set it up wherever you want. By the fire's warmest. I'll keep first watch. Watch for what? Anything that needs watching. He stood, rifle in hand. Get some sleep. We've got a hard climb tomorrow. He walked to the edge of the clearing and stood there, a dark silhouette against darker trees. Mara pulled out the second bedroll. Her hands shook as she unrolled it near the fire. She lay down, pulled the blanket up to her chin. The ground was hard. The air was cold. Her body ached in 17 different places. But for the first time in 3 weeks, she felt something close to safe. She closed her eyes. Sleep came harder than she expected. Every sound made her tense, the pop of the fire, the rustle of wind through pine needles, the distant call of some night bird. Her mind wouldn't shut off, spinning through questions without answers. What was Rourke planning? Where was he taking her? What would happen when they got there? What did he really want? The baby kicked again. She put a hand on her belly, felt the movement beneath her palm. A whole life growing inside her, depending on her. And she had no idea how to protect it, no idea what came next. She must have dozed eventually, because she woke to find the fire burned down to coals and the sky beginning to lighten. Rourke sat where he'd been standing, rifle across his knees, watching the forest. He hadn't slept. "Morning," he said without turning. "Water's heating. We'll eat, then move." They broke camp as efficiently as they'd made it. Mara packed the bedrolls while Rourke saddled the animals. They ate standing up, more dried meat, more softened biscuits. Then they were moving again, climbing higher into mountains that seemed to have no summit. The second day was harder than the first. The path, what little existed, grew steeper, rockier. The mule picked its way carefully over loose stone and fallen logs. Mara's muscles screamed. Her back felt like it might snap. The baby pressed so hard against her ribs she could barely breathe. She didn't complain. They stopped once to water the animals and rest. Rourke handed her dried apricots from his pack. "Sugar helps," was all he said. By the time the sun began to set again, Mara wasn't sure she could stay on the mule another minute. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her hands had gone numb. Then Rourke said, "There." She looked up. Through the trees ahead, she could see a clearing, and in the clearing, a cabin. It wasn't large, maybe 20 feet square. Log construction, a stone chimney on one end, a small porch, shuttered windows. But it looked solid, permanent, real. "This is it?" she asked. "This is it." He led them into the clearing. As they got closer, Mara could see more details. A woodshed stacked high with split logs, a small corral with a lean-to shelter, a root cellar dug into the hillside, a smokehouse, a chicken coop. She could hear the birds clucking inside. This wasn't just a cabin. This was a homestead. Rourke helped her down from the mule. Her legs almost gave out when her feet hit ground. He steadied her with one hand on her elbow. "Easy. You've been riding 2 days. I'm fine. You ain't, but you will be." He guided her toward the cabin. "Go on inside. Get warm. I'll tend the animals." She climbed the porch steps, 3 of them, sturdy and level. The door swung open on leather hinges, well-oiled and silent. Inside was darker, but not dark. Light filtered through gaps in the shutters. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out the space. One large room, a fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, a bed in the corner, real bed with a frame and mattress, shelves lined with supplies, hooks for hanging coats and tools, a wash basin, a rug on the floor, worn but clean. It smelled like pine and wood smoke and leather. It smelled like someone actually lived here. Mara moved to the center of the room and just stood there, unsure what to do, where to go, what was allowed. The door opened behind her. Rourke came in carrying her borrowed blanket and his pack. "Sit, sit," he said, nodding toward one of the chairs. "You need to get weight off your feet." She sat. He moved around the room with purpose, opening shutters, checking supplies, building a fire in the fireplace. The flames caught quickly, spreading warmth. When he seemed satisfied, he filled a pot with water from a barrel near the door and hung it over the fire to heat. "You'll want to clean up," he said. "After that, food, real food, not trail rations." "Whose cabin is this?" Mara asked. The question felt stupid the moment it left her mouth. "Mine." "You live here?" "When I ain't trapping." He pulled vegetables from a bin, potatoes, carrots, an onion, started peeling, His hands moved with the same efficiency he'd shown breaking camp. Built it myself 8 years ago. It's nice, he snorted. It's functional. That's more than most people have. His hands paused for just a moment. Then he resumed peeling. Suppose that's true. The water heated. He poured some into the wash basin, added cold water from the barrel to temper it, then set the basin on the table with a cloth. That's for you. I'll be outside. He left before she could respond. Mara stared at the basin. Steam rose from the water. A cloth. Soap. Real soap, not lie. Privacy. Her throat tightened. She stood, moved to the basin, and washed. The warm water felt like a miracle against her skin. 3 weeks of dirt and shame sluiced away, staining the water brown. When she finished, she felt almost human again. Rourke came back in carrying eggs and milk. He'd changed out of his travel clothes into a clean shirt. His hair was damp. He'd washed too. He cooked while she sat. Fried potatoes with onions, scrambled eggs, fresh bread. Where he'd gotten it, she didn't know. Maybe he'd baked it before leaving. When the food was ready, he served her first. A full plate. More than she'd seen in one sitting in weeks. Eat, he said. All of it. She did. Or tried to. Made it through most of the plate before her stomach rebelled. Too full, too fast. He didn't comment. Just took her plate, scraped the remains into his, ate standing up. Afterward, he cleaned the dishes while she sat there, exhausted and confused and terrified and something else she couldn't name. When everything was put away, he turned to face her. You take the bed, he said. I'll sleep on the floor. That's your bed. And you're pregnant and just rode 2 days through mountains. Take the bed. I don't... Mara. Her name in his mouth stopped her cold. First time he'd said it. I ain't negotiating. Take the bed. She didn't have the strength to argue. She moved to the bed, lay down on top of the blanket. The mattress was thin but real. The pillow smelled like pine. Rourke spread his bedroll near the fireplace, checked his weapons one more time, added wood to the fire. Then he lay down with his back to her and went still. Mara stared at the ceiling beams. Why are you doing this? Silence. Then, because somebody should. That's not an answer. It's the only one I got. She waited for more. Nothing came. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the pines. Inside, the fire crackled. The cabin was warm, solid, real. And Mara Vance, who'd been sold like livestock in front of her whole town, who'd been abandoned by everyone who should have protected her, who'd had nothing left but fear and shame, closed her eyes and slept. Dawn came with birdsong. Mara woke slowly, confused by the absence of pain. The shed where her father had locked her had no mattress. She'd slept on packed dirt and straw for 3 weeks. Her body had learned to expect agony, but the bed cradled her. The blanket kept her warm. The air didn't smell like rot and fear. She opened her eyes. The cabin was empty. The fire had been rebuilt. Fresh wood, flames cheerful and hot. The wash basin had been refilled with clean water. On the table sat a plate covered with a cloth. She sat up slowly, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. Her back still ached, her thighs still burned, but it was better. Manageable. She stood, walked to the table, lifted the cloth. Bread. Soft butter. Jam. A boiled egg already peeled. A cup of milk. Breakfast. Made for her. By a man who'd slept on the floor after paying $200 for a woman everyone else had called worthless. The door opened. Rourke came in carrying firewood. He saw her standing there and nodded. Morning. Eat while it's fresh. He stacked the wood by the fireplace, then moved to the barrel, ladled water into a tin cup, drank. Mara sat, ate. The food was simple but good. The bread was homemade. He'd definitely baked it himself. The jam tasted like berries from late summer. The egg was perfectly cooked. When she finished, he was sitting at the other chair working oil into a leather harness. Thank you, she said. For what? The food, the bed, all of it. He didn't look up from the leather. Ain't thanking necessary. It is to me. His hand stilled. He looked at her then, really looked, and something passed across his face. Not quite a smile, not quite pain. Something between. You're welcome, he said finally. They sat in silence for a moment. The fire crackled. Outside, chickens clucked. What happens now? Mara asked. Now? Rourke set down the harness. Now you rest. Get your strength back. Far as I'm concerned, you do what you want. Stay inside, go outside. Help with chores, don't help. Your choice. I should help. I paid to get you out of Red Hollow. His voice went hard. Not to buy a servant. You don't owe me anything. Then what do you want? For you to be safe. Simple, direct, like everything else, he said. Why? He stood, moved to the door, looked out at the mountains. Because I know what it's like when nobody gives you a choice, and I figure everybody deserves at least one. He left then, walking out into the clearing. The door swung shut behind him. Mara sat at the table, staring at her empty plate. One choice. She'd been given so few in her life. Her father made the rules, the church made the rules, the town made the rules. Even Daniel, she'd thought she was choosing him, but really, he'd been choosing her, deciding what she was worth. And when she became inconvenient, he'd unchosen her just as easily. But Silas Rourke, a man with a reputation for violence, a man who lived alone in the mountains, a man everyone feared, was offering her choice. The world had turned upside down. She stood, carried her plate to the wash basin, cleaned it. Then she looked around the cabin, really looked, trying to understand the man who lived here. Everything was functional but maintained. The tools on the wall were clean and sharp. The floor was swept. The shelves were organized. Food stores sorted by type, labeled in rough handwriting. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams. A row of candles sat ready for use. Nothing fancy, nothing wasted, but nothing neglected either. This was the home of a man who lived deliberately, who took care of what was his. Her eyes fell on a small shelf in the corner, different from the others. On it sat 3 objects: a carved wooden horse, child-sized and worn smooth by small hands; a woman's comb, simple but elegant; a tintype in a wooden frame. She moved closer. The tintype showed a younger Silas Rourke, maybe 10 years ago. He stood behind a seated woman, his hand on her shoulder. She was pretty, dark-haired, smiling at the camera, and in her lap sat a boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, grinning like the world was full of wonders. Mara stared at the image. The rumors were true then. He'd had a family, and now he didn't. The door opened. She turned quickly, guilty at being caught looking. Rourke saw where she'd been standing. His jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything, just nodded toward the door. Figured you might want to see the place in daylight. She followed him outside. The clearing was bigger than it had looked last night. Maybe half an acre of level ground carved out of the forest. The cabin sat at one end, positioned to catch morning sun. The rest of the space was divided into practical sections. The corral for animals, a large vegetable garden, mostly empty now, end of season, the woodshed, smokehouse, chicken coop, and root cellar. Beyond the clearing, the forest pressed close. And beyond that, mountains rose in every direction. They were high up, very high. The air was thinner here, crisp and cold even with the sun climbing. Nearest town is 2 days' ride, Rourke said. Nearest neighbor is a week. Once the snow comes, we're cut off until spring. When does the snow come? Month. Maybe 6 weeks if we're lucky. And you just stay here? All winter? Yep. He walked toward the chicken coop. Got enough supplies for 2 winters if I'm careful. Garden produces most of the summer. Hunt for meat. Creek never freezes. Flows from a hot spring higher up the mountain. Everything I need is right here. He opened the coop, and chickens poured out clucking and flapping. He scattered feed from a bucket. The birds descended on it like locusts. Why? Mara asked. Why what? Why live like this? Alone? He was quiet for a long moment, watching the chickens. Then, because people are loud and cruel, and they take everything you love and burn it to ash. The words were flat, factual, empty of emotion. But underneath, Mara heard an ocean of pain. She didn't push. They walked the perimeter of the clearing. He showed her where things were. The spring house where he kept milk and butter cool, the cold frame where he'd try to extend the growing season, the markers where he'd set traps in winter. You know how to shoot? He asked. No. You're going to learn. Why? He looked at her. Because if something happens to me, you need to be able to protect yourself. And because there's things in these mountains that don't care you're pregnant. Bears, cats, men, sometimes, though they're rare up here. He paused. And because you should know you can. That last part hit different. They went back to the cabin. Rourke pulled down a rifle from the wall, smaller than his, lighter. This was... He stopped, started over. This'll fit you better. Was his wife's, Mara finished in her head. He taught her how to hold it, how to load it, how to sight down the barrel. His instructions were clear and patient. He didn't hover, didn't correct unnecessarily. Tomorrow we'll shoot, he said. Work on your aim. For today, just get comfortable with the weight. She held the rifle, feeling its heft, its potential. Power. That's what this was. He was giving her power. The day passed in strange domesticity. Rourke worked on winter prep, repairing the chicken coop, checking the roof for gaps, organizing supplies in the root cellar. Mara helped where she could, though he kept insisting she should rest. She didn't want to rest. Rest meant thinking. Thinking meant remembering. So she worked. That night they ate together again. A stew this time, venison, root vegetables, herbs from his collection. It was good. Better than good. Where'd you learn to cook? She asked. Army. You learn fast when the alternative is starving. You were in the war? His face went carefully blank. Yeah. Which side? Does it matter? I guess not. They ate in silence after that. When the meal was done, he cleaned while she sat by the fire, exhausted despite having done relatively little. He added wood to the fire, set out the bedrolls, her on the bed, him on the floor, same as the night before. Rourke, she said as he lay down. Yeah? What do I call you? Mr. Rourke seems... Silas is fine. Silas. She tested the name. Felt strange on her tongue. Intimate. Thank you for everything. Go to sleep, Mara. She closed her eyes. But sleep didn't come as easy this time. Her mind kept circling back to the same question. What was the price? In her experience, nothing came free. Especially not from men. There was always a price, always an expectation, always a moment when the bill came due. So what did Silas Rourke want? And what would he do when he decided it was time to collect? The days developed a rhythm. Silas rose before dawn, rebuilt the fire, made coffee, started breakfast. Mara woke to warmth and food, and the quiet sounds of a man who knew how to live alone. They ate together. Then the day's work began. He taught her to shoot. Not all at once, that would waste ammunition, but in careful increments. Stance, grip, breathing. He'd set up targets on the far side of the clearing, chunks of wood with circles carved into them. Don't pull the trigger, he'd say. Squeeze, gentle, like you're convincing it. She missed more than she hit. But slowly, over days, her aim improved. He taught her to start fires without wasting matches. How to identify dead wood that would burn clean versus green wood that would smoke. How to bank coals so they'd last through the night. He taught her which plants were safe to eat, which would make her sick, which would kill her outright. Why do I need to know this? She asked one afternoon as they walked the tree line. Because knowing is better than not knowing. That's not an answer. He looked at her. Because if something happens to me, you'll be alone up here, and I don't want you dying from eating the wrong mushroom. The thought of being alone in these mountains, truly alone, sent ice down her spine. But he was right. Better to know. She learned the shape of his days, how he checked traps before breakfast, how he spent the afternoons preparing for winter, splitting wood, reinforcing structures, preserving food, how he worked with steady focus, never rushed, never frantic, just persistent. At night, after dinner, he'd sit by the fire and work on something, repairing tools, treating leather, carving something from wood. She'd watch sometimes, too tired to do more. What are you making? She asked one night. He held up the piece of pine he'd been shaping. It was starting to look like a small bowl. Figured you might want something for the baby, when it comes. Her breath caught. He kept carving, not looking at her. Babies need things. And I don't know what comes down from town anymore, if anything does. You're making baby things. Just a bowl, maybe a spoon. Nothing fancy. But it wasn't nothing. It was acknowledgement. Recognition that she wasn't just a woman who'd been pregnant when he found her. She was going to have a child, and that child would need care. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded, kept carving. The silence between them changed as the days passed, became less awkward, less weighted with unspoken questions, but not comfortable. Not yet. Because Mara was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. She watched him when he didn't know she was looking, trying to figure him out, trying to see the angle. He never took more than his fair share of food, never brushed against her unnecessarily, never looked at her with that appraising hunger she'd learned to recognize in men. He was patient with her mistakes, didn't make her feel stupid when she couldn't do something right the first time. He checked on her, casually, not obsessively. "You feeling okay? Baby moving today? Need anything?" But he never pressed, never demanded answers, never acted like he owned her time or attention or body. It was driving her crazy, because it didn't fit. None of it fit. Men didn't do this. They didn't buy women and then leave them alone. They didn't offer safety without expecting something in return. There had to be a catch. On the 7th night, after they'd eaten and he'd started his evening work, oiling a saddle this time, she couldn't take it anymore. "When?" she asked. He looked up. "When what? When do you tell me what you really want?" His brow furrowed. "I don't. You paid $200 for me. You brought me up here. You're feeding me, housing me, teaching me things. There has to be a reason. There has to be something you expect. I told you, Kate. You told me I'm safe, that I don't owe you anything, that I have choices." Her voice rose despite her efforts to keep it level. "But that's not how it works. That's never how it works. So when do you tell me what you really want? When do you come collect?" He set down the saddle, stood up. His face had gone hard. "You think I'm waiting to force myself on you?" It wasn't a question. Mara's hands curled into fists. "Every man wants something." "I ain't every man? Then what are you?" "Someone who's trying to do one decent thing in a life full of blood and mistakes." The words came out harsh, raw. He turned away, ran a hand through his hair. "You want to know why I bought you? Really, why?" "Yes." He turned back. His eyes were storm-dark and furious, but not at her, at something else, something internal. "Because 8 years ago, I had a wife and a son. And one day I came home from hunting and found raiders had been through. Found them both." His voice cracked. He swallowed hard. "Found them dead. Burned the house with them in it, and I wasn't there. I was out in the woods chasing deer while my family was murdered." The air left Mara's lungs. "I tracked those men for 3 months," Silas continued, voice flat now, dead. "Found all 5 of them, killed 4. The 5th got away. Spent the next year hunting him. Found him in a town like Red Hollow. He was drunk, bragging about what they'd done, laughing about it." He stopped, swallowed again. "I didn't just kill him. I made it hurt, made it last. And when it was done, I looked around that saloon and saw everyone staring at me like I was a monster. And maybe they were right. Maybe that's what I am." He moved to the window, looked out at the darkness. "I came up here to die. That was the plan. Live alone until something got me. The cold, the animals, my own hand. Didn't much matter. But I kept living, kept waking up, kept breathing. And I realized maybe I was supposed to. Maybe there was something I was supposed to do before the end." He turned back to face her. "Then I came down to trade and saw them selling you. Saw your father's face. No remorse, just relief. Saw that boy who got you pregnant standing there like you didn't exist. Saw a whole town ready to let you disappear. And I thought..." He shook his head. "I thought maybe this was it. Maybe this was the thing. Maybe I could save one person since I couldn't save the 2 that mattered." Silence filled the cabin. Mara's throat was tight. Her eyes burned. "That's what I want," Silas said. Voice quiet now. "I want to know I did one good thing before I die. That's it. That's all." He moved to his bedroll, lay down with his back to her. "Now go to sleep." Mara sat frozen for a long moment. Then she moved to the bed, lay down, stared at the ceiling, and for the first time since Red Hollow, she cried. Not for herself, for him, for the man who'd lost everything and still found a way to give, For the man who thought he was a monster but was the first person to treat her like a human being in months. She cried until there was nothing left, until exhaustion pulled her under. And when she woke the next morning, nothing had changed, except everything had, because now she understood. Silas Rourke wasn't waiting to collect. He'd already paid his price, 8 years ago, in blood and ash and grief. And now he was trying to balance the scales in the only way he knew how, by saving someone else. Even if he couldn't save himself. The days grew shorter, colder. The aspens on the lower slopes turned gold, then shed their leaves like tears. Morning frost lingered longer each day, painting the world white until the sun burned it away. Mara's body changed with the season. Her belly swelled larger, making simple tasks complicated. Bending to gather eggs became an exercise in balance. Carrying water from the creek required both hands and careful steps. Her back ached constantly now, a deep throb that never quite went away. But she was stronger too. The mountain air, the work, the food, all of it was rebuilding what Red Hollow had torn down. Her arms had muscle now. Her hands had calluses. She could split kindling without thinking, start a fire in under a minute, hit a target at 30 yards more often than not. Silas watched her progress with something that might have been pride, though he never said as much, just nodded when she did something right, offered quiet corrections when she didn't. The confession he'd made that night hung between them like smoke, visible but untouchable. They didn't speak of it again. But something had shifted. The careful distance he'd maintained began to crack, not in big ways, in small ones. He started asking her opinion on things. Which vegetables to harvest first, whether the chicken coop needed reinforcing before the snow, where to hang the herbs for drying. She started answering honestly instead of trying to guess what he wanted to hear. One morning, 3 weeks into her time on the mountain, she woke to find him standing at the window, coffee in hand, staring out at the clearing with an expression she couldn't read. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting up slowly. "Snow's coming. Today. Maybe tomorrow. Can smell it." She joined him at the window. The sky had that peculiar heaviness that came before a storm. The air felt charged. "Are we ready?" "Yeah." He took a sip of coffee. "But once it starts, we're locked in. No going down the mountain until spring. You understand that?" "I understand." He looked at her. "You're sure? Because if you want to leave, now's the time. I can take you down. Find you a place in—" "I'm not leaving." The words came out harder than she'd intended, but they were true. Where would she go? Back to Red Hollow? To another town where she'd be the pregnant woman with no husband, no family, no prospects? Where men would look at her and see what Daniel had left behind? Used goods, damaged merchandise? Here, she was building something. Maybe not a life, not yet, but the foundation of one. Here, she was safe. Silas studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right. Then we've got work to do." They spent the day in final preparations, bringing in extra firewood, double-checking the food stores, making sure the animals had shelter and feed. Mara worked until her back screamed and her hands went numb, and then she worked some more. The first flakes started falling as they finished the evening chores, big, fat flakes that drifted down lazy and beautiful. They stood in the doorway of the cabin, watching the snow settle onto the clearing like a blanket. "Beautiful, ain't it?" Silas said. "Yeah. Wait till morning. Whole world turns into something else." That night, the wind picked up. By the time they went to bed, the storm was howling around the cabin, shaking the shutters, making the whole structure groan. Mara lay in the darkness, listening to the wind scream. The baby kicked, restless. She put a hand on her belly, trying to soothe. "You all right?" Silas's voice cut through the storm noise. "Can't sleep." "Storm's bad, but the cabin's solid. Been through worse." "It's not the storm." She paused. "Well, not just the storm." Silence. Then, "Baby?" "Yeah, moving a lot. And I keep thinking—" She trailed off. "Thinking what?" "What happens when it comes? I don't know anything about birthing, and there's no doctor, no midwife, nothing." More silence. She could hear him breathing across the room, steady and calm. "There's books," he said finally. "Medical books. I've got them stored. Bought them after—" He stopped. Started again. after my wife got pregnant the first time. Figured I should know things. In case. Did you read them? Yeah, cover to cover. Even practiced some. Made her laugh, me trying to figure out diagrams and Latin words. The grief in his voice was subtle but there. Always there. Just beneath everything he said. Will you teach me? Mara asked. What's in the books? Tomorrow. We'll go through them together. Thank you. Stop thanking me. Can't help it. She heard him shift on his bedroll. Then, Mara? Yeah? You're going to be all right. The baby too. I'll make sure of it. Something in her chest loosened. I believe you. And she did. That was the strange part. She actually did. The storm lasted 3 days. The world outside became nothing but white noise and whipping snow. They stayed inside tending the fire, rationing their movement to conserve warmth. Silas brought out the medical books. 3 of them, thick and worn, the pages dog-eared from previous reading. They sat at the table and went through them page by page. He explained anatomy with clinical precision, showed her diagrams of how birth worked, what to expect at each stage, what could go wrong, and how to handle it. This here, he pointed to an illustration. This is if the baby's breech. Coming out feet first instead of head. It's harder, takes longer, but it can be done. Have you ever done it? His jaw tightened. Helped with animals, foals, calves. Same principles. She didn't ask about his son. Whether his wife's labor had been easy or hard. Whether he'd been there or out hunting again. Some wounds were too deep to touch. They practiced with cloth and rope, him showing her positions that might help with pain, ways to breathe through contractions. It was awkward and uncomfortable and absolutely necessary. You're going to need something to bite down on, he said. When it gets bad, leather strap works. I'll make one. How bad does it get? He met her eyes. Bad. Worse than anything you've felt. But then it's over, and you've got something worth the pain. Your wife, did she? She was brave. Braver than me. And when she held our son for the first time, he looked away. Ain't words for that. Ain't words for a lot of things. On the 3rd day, the storm broke. They woke to silence so complete it was almost frightening. Silas opened the door and they stepped out onto the porch. The world had transformed. Snow covered everything, 3 feet deep at least, sculpted by wind into drifts and valleys. The trees were weighted down with it, branches bowing under the load. The sky was crystalline blue, painful to look at, and the silence, the absolute perfect silence. It's like we're the only people left alive, Mara whispered. Sometimes feels that way even without the snow. They spent the morning digging out, clearing a path to the woodshed, the chicken coop, the corral. The physical work felt good after 3 days of being cooped up. Mara's muscles burned, her breath came hard in the thin air, but she pushed through. Silas watched her shovel snow with that same expression he got sometimes, like he was seeing something that surprised him. What? She asked, pausing to catch her breath. Nothing, just, you're tougher than you think. Had to be. Life doesn't give you much choice. No, it don't. They worked until the sun reached its peak, then went inside to warm up and eat. Mara's hands were numb, her cheeks burned from the cold, but she felt alive in a way she hadn't in months. That afternoon, Silas announced he was going to check the trap line. You'll be alone for a few hours, he said, strapping on his snowshoes. You good with that? I can manage. Rifle's loaded, right there. He pointed to where it hung on the wall. Anything comes near the cabin that ain't me, you shoot first and ask questions never. Understand? Understand. He hesitated at the door. Lock it behind me. Don't open it unless you hear me call. I'll be fine, Silas. Go. He nodded. Then he was gone, disappearing into the white forest like a ghost. Mara locked the door, checked the windows, fed the fire. Then she sat at the table and just existed. Alone. Actually alone. It should have been frightening, but instead it felt almost peaceful. The cabin was warm. The fire crackled. Outside, the world was clean and white and empty. For the first time in her life, Mara wasn't performing for anyone. Wasn't trying to be smaller, quieter, more acceptable. Wasn't waiting for approval or bracing for judgment. She was just herself. The baby kicked. She put both hands on her belly, felt the movement ripple across her skin. "It's just you and me right now," she said aloud. "And we're safe. For the first time in a long time, we're actually safe." The baby kicked again, as if in agreement. Mara found herself smiling. Silas returned 3 hours later with 2 rabbits and a grouse. He called out before approaching, just like he'd promised. She unlocked the door. "Good hunting?" "Good enough." He brought the game inside, hung it to process later. His face was red from the cold, ice crystals clinging to his beard. "You were all right?" he asked. "I was fine. Actually, it was nice, being alone." Something flickered in his eyes. Not hurt, understanding. "Good. You should be comfortable here, even when I'm gone." They fell into the routine of processing the game together. He showed her how to dress a rabbit. Quick, efficient cuts, nothing wasted. She tried not to think about the fact that this was someone's dinner, something that had been alive that morning. But she didn't look away either. This was survival. This was life on the mountain. "You're learning fast," Silas said as she worked on the second rabbit. "Good teacher." "Nah, you're just paying attention. Most people don't. They go through life half asleep, missing what's right in front of them." "Is that what you did? Before?" He paused in his work. "Yeah, took things for granted. Figured there'd always be time, always be another chance, then one day there wasn't." "I'm sorry." "Me too." They cooked the rabbit for dinner, roasted with herbs and the last of the potatoes. The meat was lean and gamey, but good. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. After dinner, Silas carved while Mara mended one of his shirts. The button had come loose and he'd mentioned it offhand. She'd offered to fix it without thinking. Now she sat with needle and thread, working by firelight, and realized this was domestic. This was the kind of evening married people had. Except they weren't married, weren't even really together. Were they? She didn't know what they were. "Silas? When spring comes, what happens?" His hand stilled on the wood. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do I stay? Do I go? What's the plan?" He set down his carving, looked at her directly. "That's up to you." "Is it?" "Yeah, it is. You want to stay, you stay. You want to go, I'll take you wherever you want to go. Help you get set up, make sure you're safe. And if I stay, then you stay. We figure it out as we go." "As what, your, housekeeper? Guest?" He frowned. "As someone who lives here, with me, sharing the work, the space, the life. People will talk. People always talk. Don't mean we have to listen. And when the baby comes, people will have questions. Let them question. Up here ain't nobody's business but ours." She studied his face, looking for the angle, the catch. The moment when he'd reveal what he really expected. But all she saw was honesty, plain and simple. "Why do you make it sound so easy?" she asked. "Because it is easy. You complicate it by trying to find the trap. There ain't one." "There's always a trap." "Not here." He picked up his carving again. "Not with me." Mara went back to her mending, but her mind spun. Could it really be that simple? Could she just stay? Build a life here with this strange, damaged man who'd bought her freedom and asked for nothing in return? It seemed impossible. But then again, so did everything else that had happened in the past month. The weeks blurred together. Snow fell, melted slightly, fell again. The temperature dropped further. At night, the cold was so intense that even banked coals barely kept the cabin warm. Silas added an extra blanket to Mara's bed, started sleeping closer to the fire, his body positioned to block drafts from reaching her side of the room. She noticed, said nothing. He taught her to read weather patterns in the clouds, the wind, the way the animals behaved, taught her to navigate by stars when the sky was clear, taught her to make soap, render fat, preserve meat. She absorbed it all like a woman dying of thirst. Not just the skills, the knowledge that she could survive, that she wasn't helpless. Her body continued changing. The baby dropped lower, making breathing easier but walking harder. Her ankles swelled. Her back hurt constantly. Simple tasks became monumental efforts. Silas adjusted without being asked, split more wood so she didn't have to, carried the heavy water buckets, took over the harder chores without comment or fanfare. When she tried to thank him, he'd just shrug. You're growing a human. That's work enough. One night, about 6 weeks into the snow season, Mara woke to pain. Not labor. She knew that instinctively. But wrong. Something was wrong. She sat up, pressing a hand to her belly. The pain came again, sharp, localized. Silas? He was awake instantly. What's wrong? I don't know. Pain. Here. She guided his hand to where it hurt. He pressed gently, feeling. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. Baby moving? Yes, but it hurts. All right, lie down, on your left side. She obeyed. He brought the medical books, flipped through them by candlelight. Could be the baby's position, pressing on something. Could be your body preparing. Could be... He stopped reading. Could be nothing, but we watch it. If it gets worse, if there's blood, you tell me immediately. Understand? I'm scared. I know, but fear don't help. Action helps. So we watch, we wait, and we deal with what comes. He stayed up the rest of the night, sitting beside the bed, checking on her every hour. The pain eased by morning. The baby was moving normally again, but something had changed. The reality of what was coming, the birth, the danger, the 1,000 things that could go wrong, had become impossible to ignore. I could die, Mara said over breakfast. Not dramatic, just factual. Silas looked at her. You could, but you won't. You don't know that. No, but I believe it. And sometimes belief is enough to tip the scales. Is that what kept you alive? Belief? Nah. What kept me alive was stubbornness and anger and the fact that dying felt like giving up. He paused. And maybe, somewhere deep down, the idea that there might be a reason I was still breathing, that maybe there was something I was supposed to do. Like saving me? Maybe. Or maybe you saved yourself and I just opened the door. She didn't have an answer to that. The days grew even shorter. By midwinter, the sun barely cleared the peaks before it started dropping again. The world existed in shades of white and gray and the deep blue of shadows on snow. They developed rituals. Morning coffee together while the cabin warmed, evening meals by firelight, Silas carving while Mara read aloud from the books he kept, not just medical texts, but stories, histories, things he'd collected over the years. Sometimes she'd look up from reading and find him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. Not lust, something else, something softer and more dangerous. One night she set down the book. Why do you look at me like that? Like what? Like you're seeing something I can't. He was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the shutters. Because I am, he said finally. I see someone who's stronger than she knows. Who's survived things that would have broken most people. Who's building herself back piece by piece and don't even realize she's doing it. That's not what I see when I look in the mirror. Maybe you're looking at the wrong things. What should I be looking at? The fact that you're still standing, still fighting, still trying. He set down his carving. Mara, you were sold like livestock by your own father, abandoned by the man who claimed to love you, mocked by an entire town. And instead of breaking, you're here, learning to shoot, to survive, to build a life out of nothing. That ain't weakness. That's steel wrapped in skin. Her throat went tight. I don't feel like steel. Steel never does. It just is. She looked away, blinking hard. I'm not what you think I am. You're exactly what I think you are. You just can't see it yet. The silence stretched. Mara's hands twisted in her lap. The baby kicked, hard enough that she gasped. Silas was beside her in an instant. What's wrong? Nothing, just here. She took his hand, pressed it to her belly. The baby kicked again. She watched Silas's face transform, shock, wonder, something that looked almost like pain. That's, he trailed off. A person, growing inside me, real and alive and depending on me to keep it safe. His hand stayed where she'd placed it. When the baby kicked again, he smiled. Actual smile, rare and genuine. Strong, he said. Gonna be a fighter, that one. Like its mother? Yeah, like its mother. He pulled his hand away slowly, like he was reluctant to break the connection. Went back to his seat by the fire. But something had shifted again. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things neither could say. That night, Mara lay awake long after Silas's breathing had evened into sleep. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the baby move beneath her palm. She thought about Red Hollow, about her father's face when he sold her, about Daniel's denial, about the crowd's mockery, and she thought about Silas, about the way he looked at her like she mattered, about the patience in his teaching, about the care in his hands when he'd felt the baby kick, about the way her heart had started doing strange things when he smiled. No, she couldn't think like that, couldn't let herself feel things that would only lead to more pain. He'd saved her out of guilt and grief, out of a need to balance some cosmic ledger after failing his family. He didn't want her, not really. He wanted redemption. But even as she thought it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. There was something in the way he said her name, something in the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, something that terrified her more than the mountain, more than the coming birth, more than anything else. Because if she let herself hope, let herself believe there might be something real between them, and it turned out she was wrong, she didn't think she'd survive that kind of breaking, so she pushed the thoughts away, buried them deep, focused on survival, on the baby, on getting through each day. That was enough. It had to be enough. By the time February arrived, marked only by Silas's careful notation in a journal he kept, Mara was huge. Her belly preceded her through doorways, her back curved under the weight. Simple tasks like putting on her boots required help. Silas provided it without comment, no judgment, no pity, just steady assistance. "Won't be long now," he said one morning, studying her. "How long?" "Month, maybe less." Baby's dropped. That means it's getting ready. Fear spiked through her. "I'm not ready." "Yes, you are. You've been ready since the day you stepped onto that auction block and didn't break. That's different." "How?" That was just surviving. She gestured helplessly at her belly. "This is surviving too, just a different kind." He moved closer, his voice gentling. "And you ain't doing it alone. I'll be here. Every step. I promise. What if something goes wrong? Then we deal with it, together. What if I die?" "You won't. You can't know that." "No, but I can believe it, and I can fight like hell to make sure it's true." His eyes were steady on hers. "I failed my family once. I ain't failing you. Or that baby. I don't care what it takes." The intensity in his voice made her shiver, not from fear, from something else entirely. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." They stood there, close enough to touch, the air between them crackling with tension neither would name. Then the baby kicked, hard, and the moment broke. Silas stepped back, cleared his throat. "I'll get breakfast started." Mara nodded, not trusting her voice. But as she watched him move around the cabin, she felt something shift inside her chest. Something dangerous and terrifying and wonderful. She was falling for him. Had been falling for weeks, maybe. But now it was undeniable. She loved the way he moved, efficient, purposeful, never wasting motion. She loved his voice, rough and deep, especially in the morning before coffee. She loved his hands, scarred and strong, capable of violence but so gentle when they needed to be. She loved his honesty, his patience, his stubborn refusal to give up on her even when she'd given up on herself. She loved him, and it was the worst possible timing, the most dangerous thing she could feel. Because men like Silas Rourke didn't love broken women carrying other men's children. They saved them out of guilt, out of grief, out of a desperate need for redemption. But they didn't love them, did they? The snow began to melt in late February. Not all at once. The mountains didn't give up winter that easily. But the days grew longer, the sun climbed higher, and water started dripping from the roof edges in the afternoons. Mara waddled more than walked now. Her belly was enormous, tight as a drum. The baby seemed to run out of room, its movements changing from kicks to strange, rolling sensations that made her skin ripple. She couldn't sleep lying down anymore. Spent most nights propped against the headboard with pillows Silas had made from scraps of fabric and dried grass. He'd wake sometimes and find her sitting there in the darkness, one hand on her belly, staring at nothing. He never asked if she was all right. Just got up, rebuilt the fire, made her tea from dried herbs that were supposed to help with the discomfort. "You don't have to," she'd say. "I know." but he did it anyway. One morning, she woke to voices outside the cabin. Men's voices. Multiple. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She sat up too fast, pain shooting through her back. Silas was already at the window, rifle in hand. His posture was relaxed, but his jaw was tight. "Who is it?" she whispered. "Don't know yet. Stay here." He opened the door and stepped onto the porch. Mara struggled out of bed, moved to where she could see through the gap. 3 men on horseback at the edge of the clearing. She recognized 2 of them immediately. Patterson, the boarding house owner who'd bid on her, and beside him, looking uncomfortable and angry, Daniel Carr. The 3rd man she didn't know, older, wearing a sheriff's badge that caught the morning light. "Rourke," the sheriff called, his voice carried across the clearing, authoritative but not aggressive. "Need a word. Then have it from there, close enough for talking." The sheriff dismounted. So did Daniel. Patterson stayed on his horse, eyes scanning the cabin like he was taking inventory. "We're looking for Mara Vance," the sheriff said. "Her father filed a complaint, says she was taken against her will, says there's questions about the legality of the transaction." Silas's laugh was harsh. "Transaction was legal, paper signed by a judge, witnessed by half of Red Hollow. You want to challenge it? Bring a lawyer." "Just doing my job, Rourke, making sure the girl's all right." "She's fine." "I'd like to hear that from her." "No." Daniel stepped forward. "Look, this is ridiculous. We just want to make sure she's safe, that she's being treated right." "Since when do you care how she's treated?" Silas's voice went cold. "Seems to me you stopped caring the moment you denied that baby was yours." Daniel's face flushed. "That's between me and her." "No, that's between you and your conscience, if you got one." "Let me see her," Daniel said. "Let me talk to her. Then we'll leave." Silas shifted the rifle, not pointing it at anyone, just adjusting his grip. "She don't want to see you." "How do you know? You speak for her now?" "I know because she told me. And yeah, I speak for her when men show up at my door making demands." The sheriff held up a hand. "Easy, everyone. Rourke, I got no quarrel with you, but I need to verify the girl's welfare. That's the law. So either she comes out or I come in. Your choice." Mara's hands clenched. Her heart hammered. She could stay inside. Let Silas handle this. Let him protect her like he'd been protecting her for months, or she could step outside and face them herself, prove she wasn't the same girl they'd sold on that auction block. She moved to the door before she could change her mind. Silas heard her coming, turned. "Mara, you don't have to." "I know." She stepped past him onto the porch. The 3 men stared. Patterson's eyes went wide. Daniel's face went pale. She knew what they saw. A woman 8 months pregnant, bigger than most of them probably remembered. Hair longer, pulled back in a braid. Wearing men's clothes, one of Silas's shirts, pants she'd taken in at the waist. Work boots, but also stronger, healthier, standing tall despite the weight she carried. Not broken, not hiding. "You wanted to verify my welfare?" she called across the clearing. "I'm fine. Better than fine. Now leave." The sheriff cleared his throat. "Miss Vance, it's just Mara." "Mara, your father's concerned." "My father sold me." Her voice didn't shake. "In front of everyone for $200, so forgive me if I don't give a damn about his concerns." Daniel took another step forward. "Mara, please, I just want to talk, to explain." "Explain what?" The words came out sharp as broken glass. "How you told my father that baby wasn't yours? How you stood there and watched them auction me off? Or maybe you want to explain why you're here now. Let me guess, your conscience finally woke up, or is it something else?" "I made a mistake," Daniel said. His voice cracked. "I was scared. I panicked. But I've been thinking about it, and now that I'm not your problem anymore, you suddenly care?" Mara laughed. It came out bitter. "No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to show up here months later and pretend you're some kind of hero. The baby's mine. I know it is. And I want to make it right. The baby's mine, not yours. You lost any claim when you called me a liar." "Mara, shh." "No." She moved to stand beside Silas, not behind him, beside him. "I'm not going back. Not with you. Not with anyone. I'm staying here. By choice. My choice. Something you never gave me." Patterson shifted in his saddle. Girl, you sure about this? Living up here with him? He nodded at Silas. Man's got a reputation. Dangerous. You might be safe now, but what happens when... When what? Mara cut him off. When I become inconvenient, when I need something, let me tell you what happens. He takes care of it. He teaches me. He treats me like a human being instead of property. So yeah, I'm sure. More sure than I've ever been about anything. The sheriff studied her face. He forcing you to say this? Do I look forced? Hard to tell sometimes. Then let me be clear. I choose to be here. I choose him. And if you or anyone else from Red Hollow comes up this mountain again, you better bring a warrant, because otherwise you're trespassing. Silas's hand touched her elbow briefly. Support, pride, something warm that made her chest tight. The sheriff looked between them, then nodded slowly. All right, I've done my duty. Verified you're here of your own will. But Miss Mara, if you change your mind, if you need help, you send word. Understood? Understood. He turned to Daniel. You heard her. Time to go. I'm not leaving without... Yeah, you are. The sheriff's voice went hard. She made her choice clear. You don't get a vote. Daniel's face twisted. Anger, hurt, frustration, all of it warring across his features. This ain't over. Yeah, Silas said quietly. It is. And if you come back here, we're going to have a different kind of conversation, the kind that ends with you regretting the trip. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Daniel must have heard the difference because he paled, turned, mounted his horse without another word. Patterson lingered. Shame, he said, looking at Mara. Could have had an easier life if you'd been smart. I am being smart, that's why I'm staying. He spat into the snow and rode after Daniel. The sheriff tipped his hat. Good luck to you both. Then he mounted and followed the other two down the mountain. Mara and Silas stood on the porch until the men disappeared into the trees, until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Then Mara's knees gave out. Silas caught her before she hit the boards, swept her up, easy, despite her weight, and carried her inside. Set her on the bed. Breathe, he said. Just breathe. She tried. Her chest was too tight. Her hands shook. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving nothing but tremors and nausea. I thought I was ready, she gasped. Thought I could face them without... You did face them. You stood there and told them exactly what you thought. That took guts. I'm shaking. Guts and shaking ain't mutually exclusive. He pressed a cup of water into her hands. Drink, slow. She obeyed. The water helped. Her breathing steadied. Did you mean it? Silas asked quietly. What you said? About what? About choosing me. About staying. She looked up at him. His face was carefully neutral, but his eyes held something fragile, something that looked almost like hope. I meant every word. His breath released in a rush. He sat on the edge of the bed, ran a hand through his hair. They'll come back. Maybe not those three, but someone. Your father, the town. They'll keep trying. Let them try. Mara, no, listen. She set down the cup, turned to face him fully. I spent my whole life being what other people wanted. Dutiful daughter, respectable girl. Whatever kept the peace. And where did it get me? Pregnant and alone, sold like livestock because I wasn't convenient anymore. I'm done living like that. I'm done letting other people decide who I am and what I'm worth. And who are you? I don't know yet, but I'm figuring it out. And I'm doing it here with you because you're the only person who ever let me choose. Something cracked in his expression. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered against her cheek. You're braver than you know, he said. You keep saying that because it keeps being true. They stayed like that for a moment, his hand warm against her skin, her heart doing dangerous things in her chest. Then the baby kicked, hard, and she winced. Silas pulled back. You all right? Just, baby doesn't like drama, apparently. Smart kid. He stood, moved to the fireplace, but the air between them felt different now, charged, like something had been acknowledged, even if it hadn't been spoken. The next few days were tense. Silas kept watch more carefully, always aware of sounds from the forest, movements at the clearing's edge. He made sure the rifle was loaded, the ammunition accessible. "You really think they'll come back?" Mara asked. "I think men like Daniel don't like being told no, and I think your father's got a lot of pride invested in keeping his reputation clean. So what do? We prepare, we stay alert, and if they come, we stand our ground." Together? Together. But days passed and no one came. The snow continued melting. Streams appeared where before there'd been only white. The animals grew more active, birds returning, small creatures emerging from winter dens. And Mara grew heavier, slower, more uncomfortable with each passing day. She woke one morning to find Silas outside, working on something in the clearing. When she waddled out to investigate, she found he'd started building an addition to the cabin. "What's this?" she asked. "Another room, small, for the baby." "You're building a nursery?" "Don't get excited. Just walls and a roof. Place to put a cradle without it being in the main room." He paused, hammer in hand. "Figured the kid should have its own space, even if it's small." Mara's throat went tight. "Silas also gives you more privacy. Once the baby comes, you'll want that." She watched him work. The way his muscles moved under his shirt, the concentration on his face, the care he took with each measurement, each cut. He was building a home, not just a shelter, a home. For her, for the baby, for them. "Why, she asked. He looked up. "Why what?" "Why are you doing all this, really?" He set down the hammer, walked over to where she stood, looked down at her with those gray eyes that saw too much. "Because when I look at you, I don't see what everyone else saw. I don't see damaged goods or someone else's mistake. I see a woman who survived hell and came out stronger. I see someone worth building a life with. And I see a future that don't look like slowly dying alone on this mountain. You barely know me. I know enough. Know you're tough. Know you're honest. Know you don't quit even when quitting would be easier." He paused. "Know I feel more alive with you here than I have in 8 years. Silas, I ain't asking for anything," he said quickly. "Ain't expecting you to feel the same, just being honest about where I stand. Because you deserve that. Deserve someone being straight with you for once." Mara's heart hammered. Her hands found her belly, pressing against the life growing there. "What if I do?" she whispered. "Feel the same?" His breath caught. "Do you?" "I don't know. Maybe. I'm scared to." "Why?" "Because every man I've ever trusted has hurt me. And you're different. You're good. And if you turn out to be just like them, if this turns out to be, I ain't them." He took her hand. His palm was rough, warm. "I ain't perfect. I've done bad things, killed men, got enough blood on my hands to drown in. But I will never, ever make you doubt your worth. Will never make you feel small. Will never hurt you the way they did. That's a promise. How can you be sure?" "Because I know what it costs. Know what happens when you take someone for granted. And I ain't making that mistake twice." A tear rolled down her cheek. Then another. She didn't wipe them away. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Of the birth. Of being a mother. Of screwing up this kid before it's even born. Of feeling things for you and having them not be real. They're real." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Might not be simple. Might not be easy. But they're real." "How do you know?" "Because I feel them too. Have been feeling them. Trying not to. Trying to keep my distance, but..." He shook his head. "You make me want to be better. Make me want to wake up. Make me think maybe there's still something worth living for. The baby's not yours. Don't care. Everyone will assume. Let them assume. World's gonna think what it wants regardless. You'd raise another man's child? I'd raise your child. Big difference." The words hit her like a physical blow. She swayed, and he steadied her, his free hand going to her waist. "Easy. Don't pass out on me now. You're serious. You'd actually..." "Mara?" He waited until she met his eyes. "I bought you out of that town because I couldn't stand watching what they were doing to you. But I'm asking you to stay now because I want you here. Want this." He gestured at the half-built addition. the cabin, the clearing. Want a life that includes you and that baby, if you'll have me. That's basically a proposal. No, a proposal's formal, has a ring and pretty words. This is just truth. You want formal, I can do that. But I figured truth was more important. She started laughing, couldn't help it. Laughing and crying at the same time, standing in the melting snow with this impossible man who'd turned her entire world sideways. "You're crazy," she said. "Probably. You want me anyway?" "I shouldn't. That ain't an answer." She looked at him. Really looked. Saw the scars and the gray in his hair and the lines around his eyes. Saw the careful way he held himself, like he expected her to run. Saw the hope he was trying to hide and failing. Saw a man who'd been broken and put himself back together crooked but functional. Who'd lost everything and somehow found a reason to try again. Who looked at her like she was worth something. "Yeah," she said. "Yeah, I do." His smile was slow and genuine and absolutely devastating. "Yeah? Don't make me say it again." He pulled her close as her belly would allow, and pressed his forehead to hers. "We're gonna make this work." "You can't know that." "Watch me." They stood like that until the cold drove them inside. Silas made tea while Mara sat at the table, her mind spinning. This was crazy. All of it. She was about to have a baby. His baby. No, Daniel's baby. But Silas didn't care. Silas wanted to build a room for it. Wanted to be a father to it. Wanted her. It should have been impossible. Should have been too good to be true. But sitting there in the warm cabin, watching him move around the kitchen with easy confidence, she thought maybe, just maybe, it was real. That night they talked, really talked, about what came next, about the birth and what to expect, about names for the baby, about how they'd make this work. "We should probably make it legal," Silas said. "Eventually. Marriage, I mean. Gives the baby legitimacy, gives you protection if something happens to me." "That's not romantic." "Told you I wasn't good at formal." "When?" "Whenever you want. Could do it now, just us. Make it official in town after the baby comes and we can travel. Or wait. Up to you." "Just us is fine. More than fine." She paused. "But what do we say? How does it even work?" "Simple. We make promises to each other. Witnesses ain't required if both parties are willing. We write it down, sign it, and it's done." "That's it?" "That's it. Rest is just ceremony." So they did it. Right there at the kitchen table by firelight. Silas found paper and ink. They wrote out simple vows, nothing flowery, nothing religious, just promises. To stand together, to protect each other, to build a life worth living. Mara signed her name. Silas signed his. They dated it February 28th, 1882. And just like that, Mara Vance became Mara Rourke. "Feels different," she said, staring at the paper. "Good different or bad different?" "Good. Strange, but good." He folded the paper carefully, tucked it into a tin box where he kept important documents. Then he turned to her. "I ain't got a ring. Wasn't planning on. I don't need a ring." "You sure?" "I'm sure. This is enough. You're enough." He kissed her then, gentle, careful, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "First time I've done that in 8 years. Was it okay?" "Better than okay." He touched her face. "You're beautiful. You know that?" "I'm 8 months pregnant and the size of a house. Still beautiful." She wanted to argue, but the way he looked at her, like he meant every word, made the protest die in her throat. They went to bed separately that night. Same arrangement as always, her in the bed, him by the fire. But it felt different now. The distance felt intentional instead of necessary, a choice rather than a requirement. Mara lay in the darkness, one hand on her belly, thinking about the day. About Daniel's face when she'd rejected him. About the sheriff's surprise when she'd stood her ground. About Silas's hands building a room for a baby that wasn't his. About the paper in the tin box that said she belonged somewhere, to someone, that she wasn't alone anymore. The baby kicked, and she smiled in the darkness. "Your father's crazy," she whispered. "But I think maybe we got lucky. Both of us." Another kick. Agreement, maybe. Or just gas. Hard to tell with babies. "Mara?" Silas's voice drifted through the darkness. Yeah? You sleeping? Not really. Me neither. Silence. Then, I'm glad you're here. Me too. Even with everything? The isolation, the danger, especially with everything. She paused. It's the first place I've ever felt safe. Really safe. She heard him shift, saw his silhouette sit up by the fire's glow. I'm going to do everything I can to keep it that way, he said. Keep you safe. Keep the baby safe. That's a promise. I know. And when spring comes fully, when the pass is clear, if you change your mind, I won't. But if you do, Silas. She sat up as much as her belly would allow. I won't. I'm here. I'm staying. Stop waiting for me to leave. Long silence, then, all right. All right. She lay back down, closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she felt something close to peace. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. That was enough. March came in wet and wild. The last of the snow turned to slush, then mud. Streams swelled with meltwater, roaring down the mountainside like they were angry at winter for lasting so long. The clearing became a bog. Every step outside meant boots caked in thick clay that took forever to scrape clean. Mara could barely move now. Her belly had dropped so low she felt like the baby might just fall out if she stood up too fast. Her back screamed constantly. Her ankles were swollen to twice their normal size. Sleep was impossible. The baby pressed on everything important, making breathing hard and comfort a distant memory. Silas watched her like a hawk, checked on her constantly, made sure she ate, drank water, rested as much as her body would allow. I'm fine, she'd snap, irritable from exhaustion. I know. Then stop hovering. Can't help it. Try harder. But he didn't, and secretly, she was glad. The addition he'd been building was nearly finished. Just a small room off the main cabin, barely 10 feet square. But it had a window, a door, walls that would keep out the cold. He'd built a cradle too, simple but sturdy, with rockers that moved smooth and silent. Mara stood in the doorway one afternoon, looking at the empty room that would soon hold her child. It's real, she said. Silas looked up from where he was oiling the door hinges. What is? This. All of it. The baby's coming, and there's going to be a person, and I don't know how to be a mother. Nobody knows how until they do it. That's not helpful. Wasn't trying to be helpful. Was trying to be honest. He wiped his hands on a rag. You think I knew how to be a father? I was terrified the whole time. Kept thinking I'd drop him, or break him, or mess him up somehow. But you figure it out. You learn as you go. What if I'm bad at it? Then you'll be bad at it sometimes, and good at it other times. That's how it works. He moved closer. You ain't gonna be perfect. Nobody is. But you'll love that baby, and that's what matters most. How do you know I'll love it? What if I don't? What if I look at it and just see... You won't. His voice was firm. I've watched you these past months, the way you talk to it, the way your hand goes to your belly without thinking, the way your whole face changes when it moves. You already love that baby. You're just scared. I'm terrified. Good. Means you care. Means you're taking it seriously. He touched her shoulder. And you ain't doing this alone. I'm here. For all of it. She leaned into him without thinking. He wrapped an arm around her, carefully mindful of her belly, and held her. They stood like that until the baby kicked hard enough to make them both feel it. Strong, Silas murmured. Stubborn is more like it. Won't let me sleep, won't let me breathe, won't let me forget it's there for 1 second. Sounds like its mother. She elbowed him, gently. Shut up. He laughed. Actual laugh, warm and real. The sound made something in her chest expand. That night, she woke to wetness between her legs. Not much, just enough to make her freeze, heart hammering. Silas? He was awake instantly. What's wrong? I don't know, something's wet. Is that normal? He lit a candle, came to the bed. Could be your water breaking. Could be the start of it. How do you feel? Scared. Besides that, any pain? My back hurts, but my back always hurts. Different than usual? She thought about it. Maybe? It's lower, sharper. He nodded. Could be labor starting, could be false labor. We wait. Watch. Time any pains if they come. How long? Could be hours, could be days. First babies take their time. That's not comforting. Wasn't meant to be comforting. Was meant to be true. He built up the fire, put water on to heat. Gathered the medical supplies he'd been preparing, clean cloths, scissors, twine for the cord, the leather strap for her to bite. Mara watched him work, her fear building with each preparation. What if something goes wrong? He paused, looked at her. Then we handle it, together. But nothing's going wrong. You're strong. Baby's been moving good. You've been healthy this whole time. All signs point to this going fine. You can't know that. No, but I believe it. And sometimes that's enough. The pain started an hour later. Not bad at first, just a tightening across her belly that made her breath catch. They came irregularly, sometimes 10 minutes apart, sometimes 20. Silas timed each one, made notes on a piece of paper, made her walk when she could, rest when she couldn't, brought her water, food she couldn't eat, reassurance she couldn't quite believe. By morning, the pains were closer together, stronger, making her gasp and grip the edge of the table until her knuckles went white. How long? She panted between contractions. You're doing good. Making progress. That's not what I asked. Could be hours still. You're not ready to push yet. How do you know? Trust me. You'll know when it's time. The day blurred. Pain and breathing and Silas's voice talking her through each contraction. His hands on her back, pressing where it hurt worst. His steady presence that kept her from falling apart completely. She yelled at him. Told him she hated him for doing this to her even though he hadn't. Told him she couldn't do this, couldn't survive this, wanted it to be over. He took it all without flinching. Just kept breathing with her, kept counting, kept telling her she was strong enough. I'm not, she sobbed during a particularly bad contraction. I'm not strong enough. Yes, you are. You've survived everything else. You'll survive this. What if I don't? You will. I won't let you die. You hear me? I will not let you die. The conviction in his voice cut through the pain. She looked at him, his face drawn tight with worry he was trying to hide, his eyes fierce and determined. Promise? She whispered. Promise. The afternoon wore on. The pains got worse, closer together, lasting longer. Mara couldn't think between them anymore, could barely breathe. The world narrowed to just pain and Silas's voice and the desperate need for it to end. I need to check, Silas said during a brief respite. See how far along you are. She nodded, too exhausted to be embarrassed. His examination was quick and clinical. When he pulled back, his face was tight. What? She asked. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but you're close, real close. Next few contractions, you're going to feel like you need to push. Then what? Then you push, and we meet this baby. Terror spiked through her. This was it. This was actually happening. I can't. You can. You will. He moved to where she could see him clearly. Listen to me. When the urge comes, you don't fight it. You work with it. Bear down, push hard, and between contractions you rest. Save your strength. Understand? Silas, you've got this. I know you do. The next contraction hit like a freight train. And with it came pressure, immense, overwhelming pressure that demanded action. Push, Silas said. Now. Hard as you can. She pushed, felt like her body was tearing in half, screamed into the leather strap he'd given her. Good. Again. Next one. Same thing. It went on forever, pushing and resting and pushing again. Pain so intense she couldn't think, couldn't breathe, could only bear down and hope it would end. I can see the head, Silas said. His voice was shaking now. Almost there. One more good push. She didn't think she had another push in her, didn't think she could survive another second of this, but she pushed anyway. And suddenly there was release. Pressure gone. Silas moving fast, doing something she couldn't see. Then, impossibly, miraculously, a baby's cry. Thin and reedy and the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. It's a girl, Silas said. His voice cracked. You've got a daughter. He laid the baby on Mara's chest. tiny, bloody, screaming her displeasure at being born, but alive, perfect, real. Mara's hands came up automatically, cradling the impossibly small body. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh." "She's beautiful," Silas said. He was crying, actually crying, tears running down his face as he worked to cut the cord, deliver the afterbirth, make sure everything was as it should be. Mara couldn't take her eyes off the baby. Her daughter. This person who'd been inside her for 9 months was suddenly here, separate, real. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi, little one. I'm your mama." The baby's cries quieted. Her eyes, dark and unfocused, seemed to look toward Mara's voice. "Yeah, that's right. I'm here. I've got you." Silas finished his work, cleaned the baby gently, wrapped her in soft cloth. But he didn't take her from Mara, just made sure she was warm and safe in her mother's arms. "You did it," he said, voice rough with emotion. "You were incredible. I screamed at you. Don't care, you were still incredible." Mara looked down at her daughter, at the tiny face, the miniature fingers that gripped her thumb with surprising strength, at this whole person who hadn't existed in the world an hour ago. "She needs a name," Silas said. "I don't know. I hadn't thought." "Take your time. Name's important." Mara studied the baby's face, tried to imagine what name would fit, what name would carry this child through her life. "Emma," she said finally. "Her name's Emma." "Emma Rourke," Silas tried it out. "Sounds right. Emma Grace Rourke." The middle name came without thinking. Grace. Because this child was Grace. Unearned, unexpected, miraculous. "It's perfect." They sat in silence for a while. Mara in the bed, exhausted beyond measure. Silas beside her, one hand on Emma's tiny back, the baby sleeping now, content and warm. "Thank you," Mara said, "for everything, for getting her here safely. You did the hard part. We both did." She looked at him. "You're her father now. You know that, right?" His breath hitched. "Mara, I mean it. Daniel's name isn't on any paper. He's got no claim. You were here. You delivered her. You built her a room. You're the one who wanted her before she was even born." She paused. "You're her father, if you want to be." "I want to be." The words came out fierce, more than anything. "Then you are." He leaned down, pressed a kiss to Emma's head, then one to Mara's forehead. "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me be part of this. For giving me a reason to—" His voice broke. "For giving me a family again." Mara's throat went tight. She reached up, touched his face. "You gave me one first." The next few days were a blur of exhaustion and wonder. Emma needed constant care, feeding every 2 hours, changing, soothing when she cried. Mara's body ached in new and terrible ways. Everything hurt. Moving hurt. Sitting hurt. Existing hurt. But every time she looked at Emma, none of it mattered. Silas helped with everything, changed diapers without complaint, walked Emma around the cabin when she was fussy, brought Mara food and water and made sure she was healing right. He was gentle with the baby in a way that made Mara's heart hurt, like he'd been waiting years to hold a child again, and now that he could, he was memorizing every second. One night she woke to find him standing over the cradle, just watching Emma sleep. The moonlight through the window lit his face, showed the tears tracking down his cheeks. "Silas?" He turned, wiped his face quickly. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, I just—" He looked back at Emma. "I forgot what this felt like. Having someone small and helpless depending on you. Wanting to protect them from everything. Willing to die for them." "You're thinking about your son." "Yeah. And about how I failed him. Failed both of them." "You didn't fail them. You weren't there when—" "Exactly. I wasn't there. I was out hunting when they needed me most, and they died because I wasn't there to protect them. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? If I'd been there, you'd probably be dead too. Then they'd have died anyway, just with you." She sat up carefully. "Silas, you can't change what happened. You can only move forward. And you're moving forward by being here now, by protecting us, by being the father Emma needs." I'm scared I'll fail again. You won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because you're here, because you're trying, because you love her already. I can see it every time you look at her. She paused. And because you're not alone this time. We're in this together. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to sit on the edge of the bed. I don't deserve you. That's not how this works. We don't deserve each other. We just got lucky. I got lucky. You got stuck with a broken man on a mountain. I got exactly what I needed. Someone who treats me like I matter. Someone who doesn't run when things get hard. Someone who builds cradles and delivers babies and holds me when I'm falling apart. She reached for his hand. You're not broken. You're bent. There's a difference. What's the difference? Bent things can still work. Broken things can't. He squeezed her hand. When did you get so wise? When I had to survive, same as you. Emma stirred in her cradle, making the small noises that meant she'd wake soon. Silas stood, lifted her before she could start crying, brought her to Mara for feeding. As Emma nursed, Silas sat beside them, one hand on Mara's shoulder. His family. Not the one he'd lost, but the one he'd found. The one that made waking up worth it again. 2 weeks after Emma's birth, riders came up the mountain again. Mara was in the new room changing Emma's diaper when she heard Silas's voice from outside. Sharp. Warning. Her blood went cold. She wrapped Emma quickly, held her close, and moved to the window. 5 men this time. Her father at the front. Daniel behind him. 3 others she didn't recognize, hard-looking men with guns visible on their hips. Her father's face was stone. Rourke, we need to talk. Nothing to talk about. You were told to stay away. That was before. Things have changed. Nothing's changed. My daughter had a baby, my grandchild. I've got rights. You gave up those rights when you sold her. Thomas Vance's face flushed red. That was a legal transaction for her protection. Now I'm here to make sure she's being cared for properly, that the child's being raised right. She's fine. Baby's fine. Now leave. Daniel stepped forward. We just want to see them. Make sure they're okay. You got no right. Not to her, not to the baby. That's my child, Daniel said. His voice was rising. My blood. I got every right. Your blood? Mara's voice cut across the clearing. She stepped onto the porch, Emma in her arms. You denied this baby when it was convenient. You don't get to claim her now. Her father's eyes locked on Emma. Something flickered in his face. Recognition, maybe. Or regret. But it hardened quick. You can't raise a child up here, in isolation. She needs proper care, education, a real home. She has a real home and parents who love her. Parents? Her father's lip curled. You mean him? You really think he's going to stick around? Think he's going to play father to another man's bastard? Watch your mouth, Silas said. His voice had gone deadly quiet. I'm her father, Silas continued, in every way that matters. And if you ever call her that word again, we're going to have a problem that ends with you bleeding. One of the hired men reached for his gun. Silas's rifle came up so fast it was a blur. Don't! The man froze. You're making a mistake, Thomas said. Both of you. This child deserves better than... Better than what? Mara's voice shook with rage. Better than parents who wanted her? Better than being raised with love instead of shame? You want to talk about mistakes? Let's talk about you selling your pregnant daughter to the highest bidder. Let's talk about Daniel standing by while it happened. Let's talk about a whole town treating me like garbage because I was inconvenient. We came to make things right, Daniel said. To give you another chance? I don't want your chances. I don't want your charity. I don't want anything from either of you. She stepped closer to Silas. I have everything I need right here. You're being stupid, her father said. Throwing away your reputation, your future? For what? For him? Yes, for him. Because he's worth more than every man in Red Hollow combined. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is not leaving sooner. Her father's face went purple. Fine, stay here. Rot on this mountain. But when winter comes and you're starving, when that baby needs medicine and there's none to be had, when he gets tired of playing house and leaves you, don't come crying to me. I won't, because none of that's going to happen. You're sure? You're willing to bet your daughter's life on it? Yes. No hesitation. I am. Thomas stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned his horse. You're dead to me. Both of you. I've been dead to you since I told you I was pregnant. This just makes it official. He rode away without another word. The hired men followed, but Daniel stayed. He looked at Emma in Mara's arms. His face was complicated. Pain, regret, anger, all mixed together. She looks like you, he said quietly. She's mine, not yours. I know, I wanted to see her, just once. Now you have. Leave. Mara, no. You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up and expect forgiveness or understanding or anything. You made your choice. I made mine. We're done. I loved you. No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me. And when that idea got complicated, you ran. That's not love. That's convenience. He flinched like she'd hit him. Maybe she had, in a way. For what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry. For all of it. That's worth exactly nothing. But at least you said it. He nodded, turned his horse, rode after the others. Mara and Silas stood on the porch until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely, until they were alone again with just the wind and the trees and Emma's quiet breathing. They'll come back, Mara said. Maybe, but we'll be ready if they do. I meant what I said, about you being her father. I know. And about having everything I need. He put his arm around her shoulders, careful of the baby. I know that too. They went inside, closed the door, locked it. Outside, spring was taking hold. The mud was drying. Green shoots were pushing through dead grass. The world was waking up, and inside, a family was learning how to be. Not perfect, not without fear or doubt or the shadows of their pasts, but together, fighting for each other, building something new from the wreckage of what came before. Emma yawned in Mara's arms. Tiny mouth, tiny sound. Silas touched her cheek with one rough finger. She's going to grow up strong, he said, like her mother. And stubborn like her father, Mara added. I ain't her father. He stopped, corrected himself. I am her father. Yeah, you are. They looked at each other. Understanding passed between them, commitment, promise, whatever came next. More confrontations, harsh winters, the 1,000 difficulties of raising a child in isolation, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. And that would be enough. It had to be. Spring turned to summer. The mountain exploded with life. Wildflowers covering the meadows in riots of color, birds filling the air with song, the forest thick and green and alive. The creek ran clear and cold, perfect for cooling milk and butter in the spring house Silas had built. Emma grew. Not quickly, but steadily. Her eyes lost their newborn cloudiness and settled into a clear gray, Mara's eyes, though Silas swore he could see his own stubbornness in them. She learned to focus, to track movement, to smile when she heard familiar voices. Mara had never known love like this, fierce and consuming and absolutely terrifying. Every time Emma slept, Mara found herself checking to make sure she was still breathing. Every cry sent panic through her chest until she figured out what was wrong. Hungry, wet, tired, just wanting to be held. You're going to drive yourself crazy, Silas said one night, watching her check on Emma for the 3rd time in an hour. I can't help it. What if something's wrong? Then we'll handle it. But you checking every 5 minutes ain't preventing anything. It's just stealing your sleep. I can't lose her. He understood that fear, lived with it himself. You won't. She's healthy, strong. Look at her, already trying to hold her head up. That's a fighter right there. Mara looked at Emma, at the tiny fists waving in the air, at the determined expression on her face as she worked to control her own body. She is, isn't she? Gets it from her mother. They settled into rhythms. Mara learning to nurse while doing other tasks. Silas wearing Emma in a sling he'd fashioned from cloth while he worked outside. Both of them stumbling through those first months of parenthood with more confusion than grace, but somehow making it work. The garden flourished. Mara tended it while Emma napped in a basket nearby, protected from the sun by a canopy Silas had rigged. Potatoes, carrots, beans, squash. Everything grew with the kind of enthusiasm that came from rich soil and careful attention. We'll have enough to last 2 winters if we're smart about preserving, Silas said, surveying the rows of green. That's assuming we make it through one. We'll make it. We've got supplies, skills, and enough stubbornness between us to outlast anything. He was right. They'd spent the summer preparing, smoking meat, drying vegetables, pickling everything that could be pickled. The root cellar was filling up. The smokehouse hung heavy with venison and rabbit. Jars lined the shelves, their contents labeled in Mara's careful handwriting. But it wasn't just about survival. They were building a life. Silas finished the addition, made it weatherproof and warm. Built furniture, a proper table, chairs, shelves for books and supplies. Carved toys for Emma even though she was too young to use them yet. Mara learned to make soap, to render tallow, to turn animal hides into usable leather. Her hands grew confident with tasks that had terrified her months ago. They worked side by side, learning each other's rhythms, falling into patterns that felt natural despite how new everything was. And at night, after Emma was asleep, they'd sit by the fire and just talk. About everything and nothing. About their pasts, their fears, their hopes for the future. About the small moments of the day that felt worth sharing. Silas told her about the war. Not the glory parts, there weren't any, just the reality. The friends he'd lost, the men he'd killed, the way it had changed him into someone he barely recognized. I came home different, he said. My wife knew it, tried to help, tried to bring me back. And just when I thought maybe I could be that man again, they were gone. Do you think about them, still? Every day. But it don't hurt the same way anymore. Used to feel like drowning. Now it's just, they're part of me, part of who I am. But they're not all of who I am. What changed? He looked at her. You did. And Emma, you gave me a reason to be someone other than the man who lost everything. Mara's throat tightened. I didn't do anything. You survived. That's everything. She told him about her childhood, about a father who measured worth in obedience and silence, a mother who'd died when Mara was 12, leaving her alone with a man who saw daughters as obligations rather than people. I thought if I was good enough, quiet enough, perfect enough, he'd love me, she said. Took me 22 years to realize he wasn't capable of it. Some people just aren't built for love. They're built for control. You're nothing like him. How do you know? Because I've watched you with Emma. The way you hold her, talk to her, respond to her needs. That ain't control. That's love. Real love. What if I screw her up anyway? Then you'll screw her up with love instead of with cruelty. There's a difference. One evening in late July, Mara was washing dishes while Silas dried. Emma was asleep in her cradle, the sun setting beyond the window, painting the world in shades of gold and orange. I need to tell you something, Mara said. Silas set down the plate he was drying. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I've been thinking. About us. About what we are. What we are? We're married on paper, living like we're married, raising a child together, but we've never... She stopped, unsure how to say it. We've never been married in the way that matters, Silas finished. I know. Does that bother you? He was quiet for a moment. Honest answer? Always. It bothers me that I don't know if you want me that way. If this is just practical for you, partnership, survival, safety, or if it's something more. Her heart kicked. What do you want it to be? More. I want it to be more. Have wanted that for a while now. But I didn't want to push. Didn't want you to feel obligated because I gave you shelter or because we're raising Emma together. I don't feel obligated. Then what do you feel? She set down the dish she was washing, turned to face him fully. Terrified. Because I'm falling for you, have been falling for you, and I don't know if you feel the same or if you're just being kind or if... He kissed her, cut off the spiral of words with his mouth on hers. Not rough, not demanding, just certain. When he pulled back, his hands were framing her face. I love you. Have loved you for months. Probably started loving you the moment you stood on that porch and told your father to go to hell. That's a weird moment to fall in love. You were magnificent, still are. I'm a mess. I still get scared, still doubt everything, still don't know what I'm doing half the time. Yeah, and I love you anyway. All of you. The scared parts, the fierce parts, the parts that are still healing. All of it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I love you too. Even though you're stubborn and overprotective and absolutely terrible at asking for help. We're quite a pair. Yeah, we are. He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, like they had all the time in the world. Emma chose that moment to wake up, crying for attention. They broke apart, laughing. "Rain check?" Silas said. "Rain check." But that night, after Emma was fed and settled, after the fire was banked and the cabin was warm and quiet, they came together as husband and wife in truth, not out of obligation or convenience, but because they wanted to, because they'd chosen each other deliberately and completely. It wasn't perfect. They were both nervous, both carrying scars and histories that made vulnerability hard, but it was real, and it was theirs. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Silas's arm around her and Emma sleeping peacefully in her cradle, Mara felt something she'd never felt before. Whole. Not because Silas completed her, she was already complete on her own, but because choosing to be with him, choosing to build this life, choosing to love despite the risks, that made her more herself than she'd ever been. "You all right?" he murmured. "Better than all right." "Good." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Because I plan on keeping you exactly this way for as long as you'll have me." "That's a long time." "Good." Summer peaked and began its descent toward fall. The days stayed warm, but the nights cooled. The garden reached its zenith, more food than they could possibly eat fresh, so they spent long hours preserving everything for winter. Emma was 4 months old now. She could hold her head up, roll from back to front, babble in strings of sounds that almost sounded like words. She laughed, a full belly laugh that made both Silas and Mara stop whatever they were doing just to hear it again. "She's going to be smart," Mara said one afternoon, watching Emma focus intently on her own hands. "Yeah, too smart for her own good probably. She'll need that, growing up out here. She'll have more than that. She'll have us." One morning in early September, Silas came back from checking the trap line with news. "Saw smoke down the mountain, in the valley between here and Red Hollow." Mara's blood went cold. "How far?" 2 days' ride, maybe less if they're pushing. "You think it's them?" "I think we prepare like it is." They spent the day getting ready. Silas cleaned and loaded all the weapons, made sure the ammunition was accessible, brought extra water inside, secured the animals in the corral where they'd be protected. Mara held Emma close, singing to her, trying not to let the fear show. "If they come," she said to Silas, "what do we do?" "We stand our ground. We make it clear we're not going anywhere. And if they try to take Emma, they won't. I won't let them." His eyes were hard. "Neither will I." They waited. 1 day. 2. The smoke disappeared, but the tension didn't. On the 3rd day, riders appeared at the clearing's edge just after dawn. But it wasn't who they expected. The sheriff was there. So was a man in a suit, lawyer by the look of him. And behind them, only one other rider. Thomas Vance, alone this time. No Daniel, no hired guns. Silas stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Mara stayed inside with Emma, watching through the window. "Rourke," the sheriff called. "We need to talk. No trouble this time, just talk." "About what?" The lawyer dismounted. He was young, nervous, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. "I'm representing Mr. Vance. We're here to deliver a legal document." "What kind of document?" "A waiver of all parental rights to the child known as Emma Rourke, daughter of Mara Vance Rourke." Silence. Then, "Say that again." Thomas Vance cleared his throat. He looked older than he had in the spring, worn down. "I'm signing away any claim to my daughter or my grandchild, making it legal, so there's no question." "Why?" "Because I was wrong." The words seemed to cost him. "About everything, about how I treated Mara, about selling her, about all of it." "That's supposed to make up for it?" "No, nothing makes up for it, but it's what I can do now." He looked toward the cabin, though he couldn't see Mara through the window. "I don't expect forgiveness, don't deserve it, but I want her to be free, really free. No legal claims hanging over her head, no threats that I might try to take the child. Just freedom." The lawyer held out papers. "It's all legal, notarized. Once Mr. Rourke and Mrs. Rourke sign as witnesses, it's binding. The child is legally yours. No one can challenge it." Silas took the papers, read through them slowly, then he turned to the window. Mara? She came out, Emma in her arms. Her father's eyes went straight to the baby, and something cracked in his face. She's beautiful, he said, voice rough. She is. She looks like you did, when you were born. Mara said nothing, just waited. I don't expect you to understand, Thomas continued, or to forgive, but I'm sorry for all of it, for being the kind of father who put reputation over his own daughter, for failing you in every way that mattered. You're right, I don't understand, and I don't forgive, not yet. Maybe not ever. He nodded. That's fair. But I'll sign the papers, because you're right about one thing. I want to be free, and I want Emma to be free, to grow up without the shadow of Red Hollow hanging over her. The lawyer produced more papers. Mara handed Emma to Silas and signed, where indicated. Silas signed as witness. The sheriff signed as notary. When it was done, the lawyer packed everything carefully. It's official. Emma Rourke is legally the daughter of Mara and Silas Rourke. No one can challenge that. Thomas looked at Mara one last time. For what it's worth, you've got a good life here. Better than anything I could have given you. And he nodded at Silas. He's a better man than I am. I know. Be happy. That's all I want now. For you to be happy. I am. He nodded, mounted his horse. I won't come back. You have my word. What about Daniel? Daniel left, went west somewhere. Couldn't live with what he'd done, apparently. You won't see him again either. Good. The three men rode away. This time, Mara knew it was final. The chapter with Red Hollow was closed. The legal ties were severed. She was free. They stood on the porch, watching until the riders disappeared. Emma gurgled in Silas's arms, reaching for a beam of sunlight. It's over, Mara said. Yeah, it is. I should feel something. Relief, maybe. Or anger, but I just feel empty? No, full, like I can finally breathe all the way. He shifted Emma to one arm, put the other around Mara. You are free, really free, and we've got papers to prove it now. We've got more than that. We've got a home, a family, a life. Yeah, we do. Emma grabbed Silas's beard and pulled. He winced but laughed. She's got your grip. And your stubbornness. Poor kid doesn't stand a chance. They went inside, closed the door on the past, and turned toward the future. The years that followed weren't easy. Winter was hard. 2 feet of snow in November, temperatures that made the cabin creak and groan. Emma got sick once, a fever that terrified them both until it broke 3 days later. Mara struggled with the isolation sometimes, craving adult conversation beyond just Silas. But they made it work. Silas taught Emma to walk by letting her hold his fingers and stumble across the cabin floor. Mara taught her words, Mama, Papa, Dog, when they got a puppy from a trader passing through. Emma's first word was no, which surprised no one. By the time she was 2, Emma could help gather eggs, feed the chickens, follow simple instructions. She was fearless, always climbing things she shouldn't, always getting into trouble with a grin that made it impossible to stay mad. She's going to give us gray hair, Mara said, pulling Emma down from the woodpile for the 3rd time in an hour. Too late. Already got gray. Silas tugged at his temple. See? All your fault, little bug. Emma giggled and ran off to find new mischief. When Emma was 3, another trader came through. Brought news from Red Hollow. Thomas Vance had died. Heart gave out in his sleep. Daniel Carr had been found dead in some mining town, stabbed in a bar fight over cards. Mara felt nothing about Daniel, about her father, complicated grief for what could have been, but never was. You all right? Silas asked that night. Yeah, just thinking about how different things could have been. If he'd been different, if I'd been different. You glad you're here? More than I can say. Then that's all that matters. By Emma's 4th birthday, the homestead had grown. They'd added a barn, expanded the garden, increased the livestock. Other settlers had moved into the valley below, not close, but close enough to trade with, to share news and supplies when needed. Mara had friends now, women who came up the mountain for tea and conversation, who brought their own children to play with Emma, who didn't judge her past because out here, everyone had a past. Silas was respected. known as a fair trader, a skilled trapper, someone you could count on in a crisis. The stories about his dangerous past had faded into legend, still there, but not defining him anymore. And Emma was growing up wild and free, smart and stubborn and absolutely fearless. She could ride a horse by herself now, could shoot a rifle with supervision, could track animals through the forest. "She's going to be something," one of the neighbor women said, watching Emma teach the younger children how to identify edible plants. "She already is," Mara replied. One evening when Emma was 5, Silas built a bonfire outside. They roasted meat and potatoes, told stories, watched the stars come out. Emma sat between them, her head on Silas's shoulder. "Papa, tell about when you first met Mama." Silas and Mara exchanged glances. They'd never hidden the truth from Emma, told her an age-appropriate version of how they met, how they came to be a family. "Well," Silas began, "I saw your mama standing brave when everyone else was being cruel, and I knew she was special. And then you saved her?" "No, Bug. She saved herself. I just gave her the space to do it." Emma thought about that. "I'm glad you met." "Me too." "Me 3, Mara added. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down. Emma fell asleep against Silas. He carried her inside, tucked her into bed with the stuffed rabbit he'd made her years ago. Mara stood in the doorway, watching. "You're a good father." "I'm trying." "You're succeeding." He came to stand beside her. "You know what I realized the other day?" "What?" "I'm happy. Actually happy. Didn't think I'd ever feel that again." "Me neither." "Think it'll last?" "Yeah, I do." And it did. Not perfectly. There were hard days, arguments, moments of doubt and fear, but underneath it all was something solid, something that had been forged in fire and tested by circumstance and proven true. They'd built a life from nothing, from shame and grief and broken pieces. Built it deliberately and carefully, and with more love than either had thought possible. Emma grew up strong. Mara grew into herself, confident, capable, content. Silas let go of his guilt and embraced the second chance he'd been given. On Emma's 10th birthday, Silas gave her a gift, a small wooden box with a lock. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a piece of paper, the original auction document, the one that had legally transferred ownership of Mara to Silas. "Why are you giving me this?" Emma asked, confused. "Because I want you to understand where you came from, how hard your mother fought, how strong she is." Silas looked at Mara. "And I want you to understand that love isn't about ownership or papers or what other people think. It's about choice, about choosing each other every day, about building something that matters." Emma studied the paper. "This says Mama was sold." "Yes." "That's horrible." "It was. But your mother took something horrible and turned it into something beautiful. Into us. Into you." Emma looked at Mara. "Were you scared?" "Terrified." "But you did it anyway?" "Because I didn't have a choice, and then because I found something worth fighting for." Emma hugged her mother tight, then turned and hugged Silas just as fiercely. "I'm glad you chose each other." "So are we, Bug. So are we." Years later, when Emma was grown and gone, living her own life, making her own choices, carrying forward the strength she'd learned from both her parents, Mara and Silas sat on the porch they'd built together. "You ever regret it?" Silas asked. "Staying here? Not having an easier life?" "Not once. Even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Because that's when it mattered most." She took his hand, older now, more worn, but still strong. "You gave me freedom." "I gave you a reason to live. We gave each other a life worth having. That's more than most people get. That's everything." They sat in silence, watching the sun set over the mountains they'd claimed as home, the place where a girl sold into shame had become a woman of strength, where a man drowning in grief had learned to breathe again, where a baby born into doubt had grown into certainty. It wasn't the life either had planned, it was better, because it was theirs, built from nothing but choice and courage, and the kind of love that doesn't ask permission, it demands respect. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.